appreciate it. Yeah. I get forced out of my hotter days.
TV shows are.
That's a healthy way to live. That's healthy. That's why I stick with it.
Yeah, look at that. That's the way it is. But it should be. I got there like.
Bill Mulder.
Absolutely. Right in the middle. This is awesome. I love it for you.
Another combination.
Peanut butter.
Yeah. That the rest of it, I'm not so sure. Good evening, Jim. That was a fantastic.
It was great.
That's one of those moments. It was great.
Gotta love social media.
Well, it wasn't you. It was just you were tagged. Seriously, we look like a community.
You guys weren't having any fun at all. Yeah, no.
No.
They start talking.
We're in that seat. Yeah, it's.
Yeah, you've been there a lot.
And they gave me the,
How weird.
and I knew I was positive, so everything I knew that.
I used to think that
They went in and
Who doesn't?
I thought about calling.
you become more.
No, it's. So I was some days.
Just kidding. I think that was my friend.
Oh, I remember. Love. No, this is from the library. Oh, actually, they're much.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, everybody.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, Brad, please stay item.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Yeah. I really need one day. Just like I need another home.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, you know what Frank was just saying. Johnson came here.
All right, everyone, it's 7 o'clock. I'd like to call this meeting to order. So I'll rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You're up, Nick.
John Leo,
Here.
Matt Bogira,
Here.
Al Dyke,
Here.
John Cox,
Here.
Nancy Rondell.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
One. Citizens comment. If there's something you'd like to speak about that's not on the agenda, this is your opportunity, and we do have a 3-minute time limit. You look eager tonight.
I am eager. Get in, I can once more, I thank you. My name is Father James Spears. My address is 150 West Main Street here in Harbor Springs. Just 2 requests. First request is I ask pardon if I might go over 3 minutes with the video. 2, that my other request continues to be if the bells of the church might be taken off the agenda for the noise ordinance. So with that, I would ask the video and for your attention. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Very nice.
Thank you. Very nice.
Okay, anyone else for citizens comment? Yes.
Good evening. My name is Adam Masheri. I reside at 3415 Oak Ridge Trail, Harbor Springs. I'd like to talk about the 5G antenna that is on the high school. I know it's been mentioned at this meeting before, and I know that there's legislation that was passed by Governor Snyder in 2018 that really kind of makes it difficult for the local authorities to do anything on school property. However, the residents that live in and around the school and the children and the teachers that are in the school really deserve everybody's attention. Our kids who play Little League sports, whether it's baseball, Pop Warner football, hockey, skiing, there's a concussion form that goes home to every parent, every coach, to every student that warns them about the risks of playing sport. That student athlete has to sign the form saying, hey, I understand these are the symptoms of a concussion, and if my coach wants to pull me out of the game because he thinks I might have a concussion, I'm not going to argue and I'm going to come out. And a coach can't even step onto the field unless he's had that concussion training. But we've all been using these phones for 20 plus years. We've had cell towers on top of those schools for 20 plus years. And there's been no education. There's been no training. There's been recently a 30-year contract signed by our new superintendent, who I really respect and admire. And I think he's a great superintendent. But I think unfortunately, we're going into something that has a lot of potential harms with no knowledge and no education. And the only building in our town that has cell towers on top of it is a building full of kids. And I think that's wrong. And I think it warrants further investigation and education. I don't know what you can do about it legally, but as people who we entrust to protect us, we all took an oath to serve and protect. I believe that you all have a moral obligation to do what you can to protect our citizens and especially our kids. And there's a big level of concern, especially by people that live around the school and parents that have children in the school. And I think that this is only going to grow as far as the awareness. And I'm just here to make sure that you are all aware of it, that there are a lot of concerned citizens. We don't intend to go away quietly. What we want is we want to ensure that the building is safe for our children to go to school. And the last thing I'll say is that the only regulations on wireless by the FCC date back to 1996, and they lost a lawsuit in 2021. They were sued, and a federal appellate court said that your regs are outdated and irrelevant. And I don't know how long that's going to be tied up in the courts, but we do not have a safety standard for this technology. And those cell towers were just upgraded. One of them went from 850 megahertz, which is 850 million waves per second, to 3.7 gigahertz, which is 3.7 billion waves per second. These are millimeter waves and microwaves that are harmful to all living things. So appreciate your time.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Else? move into the.
Well, and do the consent agenda.
Consent agenda for discussion.
Look good to me. I'd make a motion to approve.
Second.
John Cups.
Yep.
Nancy Rondell.
Yes.
Matt Bogira.
Yes.
John Leo.
Yes.
And Al Dyke.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Now, discussion items.
All right, the first, items 3A and 3B have kind of combined together under one memo for you because they're related both to the DDA. The first is, of course, last council meeting, council held a public hearing for renewal and amendment of the downtown development plan as well as amendment of the TIF plan. The public hearing, the DDA discussed that, and now there's an ordinance that council has to approve that Jim Raymer worked on with Margot DeMuse, Director Margot DeMuse. And the ordinance basically is amending our TIF plan. It keeps the base, starting base for tax capture at 2014. And that's why it's an amendment. The downtown development plan, if you remember from the presentation, which is also, well, the plans are included, is for 15 years from 2023 to 2038. Right? And that is what council is approving tonight on that. The second part is once the, or if the DDA, the downtown development plan and the TIF plan are approved, council then can direct staff to prepare a report on whether or not the city should go forward with continuing the special assessment in the principal shopping district, which is CBD. That special assessment is $1 a day. And we've been doing it for, I don't know exactly how many years, I think it's 2017. Yep. And so that special assessment does not automatically get approved when you approve the TIF plan or the downtown development plan. Council has to direct city manager to put a report on the costs and the revenue that could, the revenue that could be gained and the development projects that are related to that. And so we're, if council so chooses, can pass a resolution authorizing city staff to prepare a report on the special assessment.
That would be approved at a later.
At a later, yes. Margo, I don't know if there's anything you want to add from.
Only on the special assessment portion is that it's not on residences in the central business district, just the commercial property owners. And at this point, it is $1 a day. We intend to keep it $1 a day, so $365 for the year on the property owner. And I don't know if you have any other questions. I know you all have seen the TIF plan, the amended TIF plan, and the amended development plan. So, any questions about those?
So the amended, the extension of the TIF plan for 15 years. The special assessment duration is for.
That's to be determined.
Still to be determined.
So there's no proposal at this point as to what the duration of the plan would be.
For the, not the special assessment.
It would, we're considering that would not be as long as 15 years, but as part of, would be part of that report.
There would be part of the proposal that comes after the report is generated. Okay, I just wanted to be clear that we don't have a period at this point.
And then I think, as I said in the presentation, the last council meeting, that 15 years is actually the lower end of most TIF plans and compared to other areas. Most surrounding Boyne City, Charlevoix, Traverse City, St. Ignace are up at 20, 25, 30 years for their plans.
I'm happy with it. We discussed it at length last time and we read it again. Yeah, and I think I'm happy with it. The way it's written.
Yeah, so we covered it pretty well at the DDA meeting last week.
Right.
I don't see anything that jumps out in it. We have that public comment or public input on the TIF plan or DDA plan.
All right, so then if there is no public comment, I think the first thing council should do is adopt the ordinance 434, which amends the TIF plan as proposed.
I would make that motion.
Second it.
Al Dika,
Yes.
John Cox,
Yes.
Matt Bogera,
Yes.
John Leo,
Yes.
and Nancy Rondell.
Yes.
Motion carried.
And then the second item would be to adopt a resolution to authorizing city staff to prepare plans and specifications and cost estimates for a proposed special assessment district. And so we would bring back to you that plan at a future council meeting.
I would make that motion.
A second.
Matt Bogera,
Yes.
Nancy Rondell,
Yes.
Al Dika,
Yes.
John Leo,
Yes.
John Cox.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Ready to move on? All right, item 3C, government operations presentation. There's been a lot of talk again about, what budget looks like, what our operations are, and I just want to make sure I clarify for council and for the public some of the facts. So I'll go over this presentation, and if you, at the end, after the presentation, if anyone has questions, we're more than happy to answer them. So as I mentioned, the purpose of this presentation first is to inform residents on what the city has done and is currently doing, to explain certain government process policies, to ensure that residents have the correct facts and complete information, and to answer questions about the proposed public safety millage. So this is not an all-encompassing presentation. Government operations are extensive and would take several weeks to go through everything that we do here, but this is some of the most recent discussion and points that I've heard, and a lot of the items in here I've received questions about as well. Hopefully it's informative for council and public. One thing I heard and been asked multiple times now is, does the city indeed pay 100% of its employees' healthcare coverage? And that's not true. The city covers employees' monthly premium, but the employees are still responsible for their deductible, their co-pays, and procedures or services not covered by the city's healthcare plan. And different municipalities have different varieties of healthcare benefits for their employees. Some cities do an 80-20% split, some do less. Some cities also pay their employees deductibles. And so we are kind of in the middle of the road here. I think our employees appreciate that it's generous that their healthcare premiums are covered, but they're still, the deductibles are still relatively high. But the city is also continually looking into healthcare options that could save the city money while not jeopardizing city employees' benefit package. The lower we have a benefits package, the harder it is to attract and retain employees, because our salaries and our wages aren't as competitive as they were a few years ago before the significant increase in costs and demand for higher salaries. A lot of other cities and municipalities have had a significant increase in their contract negotiations for salaries and wages, and we're going through a contract negotiations next year. And hopefully this is one thing that is positive for our employees. So no, we don't cover 100% of our employees' healthcare coverage, but we do cover 100% of the monthly premium. So the city did, so someone asked a question, and this was made public at the candidates forum, was that someone was fined $12,000 for cutting trees on the bluff. And that is true. So the city has a vegetation management policy that outlines a process for receiving permission to trim or remove trees on city property. The city code has contained a provision for many decades, making it a trespass to remove vegetation from city property without city permission. In 2020, the city further passed an ordinance detailing penalties for damaging or destroying trees on city property. In this instance, trees were knowingly removed from or destroyed on city property in front of the boardwalk viewing platform, which is some of the only city property we have on the eastern portion of the bluff. We have not treated this individual different than we've treated others. For example, a few years ago, the school accidentally removed several trees on city property. We negotiated with the school and we received $30,000 in cash and in-kind donations from the school for that trespass. So we don't treat individuals different when it comes to removing trees. Sometimes it's really hard to catch people doing that, right? You have to actually have people that have witnessed it, and police have to do an investigation to determine, who actually cut the trees. In this case, it was clear, and once we do know, we enforce the law. A little history, though, of the vegetation management policy in the city. So in 1993, the initial vegetation management policy was adopted, requiring city manager approval for city-owned bluffside trees to be removed and for the applicant to pay any work done. So nearly 30 years ago was when the first real sort of policy took place, official policy regarding to bluff tree removal and tree trimming. In 2010, this policy was significantly amended to include a detailed process for trimming and removal requests. Later on, throughout the 2010s and in 2018, it was amended again. This time there was a fee established for $500, an application fee. And in 2019, we amended that policy so it applies to all city property, not just bluffside property. Finally, in 2020, after several discussions at tree board, we took to council an ordinance that detailed fines for removal damage of trees on city property. And this ordinance was actually born as a result of we didn't have a set fines in place for when the tree removed, accidentally removed trees from when the school removed trees from the city property. So we wanted to have something formal in place that we could use as enforcement, as opposed to just throwing numbers out there that aren't based on the code. So what you see here is an example of, what you see, section 30.100 of the code, which just details that no one shall cut, trim, destroy trees on city property. That's the 1993 policy that was in place. And the 2010 policy was put in place, and then it was amended again in 2018. So it's took some evolution over the course of a few decades, but that's where we're at. And the city has been pretty serious about ensuring that trees aren't removed and the property is not damaged on city property. The trees are a resource. They cost their money. They provide benefits to the environment, and I think the council and the city has recognized that and want to ensure that that people just don't remove trees without city permission. Well, this question obviously came up in a public comment and was kind of addressed in public comment as well, that this, why isn't the city doing anything about the 5G cell towers in the high school? Well, there's really not anything we can do from legally that we can do. According to state case law, public schools are exempt from zoning ordinances. City council has no control over what the school can do on its property. There are also state and federal laws that further regulate how and where cities can regulate telecommunications equipment. For example, state law saying that if a telecommunications company wants to put their towers on our utility poles, we can't stop that. We can't say no to that. We can charge them an appropriate fee, but we can't say no to that. So they can even use our utility poles to put cell towers on. So we're really kind of, our hands are kind of, not completely tied, but tied pretty significantly. We do have ordinances in our zoning code that don't allow these kinds of cell towers by right on property. So there are some things we can do, but when it comes to regulating the school and our own utility poles, we can't. So this is the Michigan court decision, Northville Township versus Northville Public Schools, which says that basically schools are immune from local zoning ordinances when it comes to site plan review. And that includes whether it's cell towers or, they build a building. The school now does often come to us when they do have site plans, and they ask for our opinion on those things. So we have a good working relation with the school, but they just don't need our approval for any of this. Another question we received is, and we get this one quite often, is how much of my property tax bills goes to the city operations? Of course, we have several different city funds, which is confusing for many people in its own right, but when you get your tax bill, you obviously see a lot of different breakdowns in there, from county operations to city operations, cemetery operations, school operations, and others. And for a full-time resident, so if it's your principal homestead, 23% of your tax bill goes to the city operations, and if you're a second homeowner, about 16% of your property tax bill goes to the city. So broken down for the median value homestead in Harbor Springs, which is about $108,000. And by median value, I mean the taxable value, not the assessed value or the market value. It's about $725 annually for that value. So we kind of put a breakdown about this in the previous presentation, but you can see the total mills if you're a principal, if you have a PRE, your primary principal residential exempted, you pay about 28.7 mils annually. And about the breakdown to that is about as of last year, 6.7 goes to the city, 5.7 about to the general fund, and about 1 mil, just under 1 mil for street operations. If you're a second homeowner, about 42.5 mils is what you pay annually, and the same amount goes to the city. So second homeowners don't pay any more to the city than full-time residents. So that's why their percentage of their overall tax bill is lower of what they contribute to the city. The question about lawsuits, yes, the city has been in a few lawsuits in the past few years, 5 to be precise. We've won 4 of them and 1 is still ongoing. So it's something that happens part of government, and 4 of those, we won 4 of those, the most recent being the Freudenberger lawsuit, which was filing a public, well, I don't know, Jim, what was the correct terminology, nuisance per se case against the city for the Irish boat shop building. So the redevelopment readies communities program, that's been thrown out a lot, and people are wondering what it is and why we're engaged. Well, it is a statewide program that encourages municipalities to improve processes so that they're more competitive with other municipalities. And they do this by planning for new investment, identifying opportunities, attracting businesses, and streamlining the development review process. It encourages best practices in government, and it looks for ways to make government more efficient. There's no cost to city to participate except our time, staff time involved. And by participating, just by participating, the city is eligible for grants for which it otherwise would not be. So even if we're not certified, we still can apply for those grants. So we don't need to be certified to be eligible for these grants. So that's the benefit of this, is as long as you're engaged in the process, you're eligible to apply for these grants. So how has the city become more open, accessible, and transparent in the past few years? Well, it started with posting our agendas at the Harbor Springs Market and the US Post Office, which is not a requirement, but we wanted to have more public spaces where our agendas could be visible. We posted agendas on social media, which we didn't do prior. We stream our meetings, our board and commission meetings on Zoom, and they're available for viewing on YouTube. Residents can sign up to have their board and commission meeting agendas and packets emailed to them now. We have about 120 people signed up for that, so that's really awesome. It's growing every week. Council meeting notices are placed in the Harbor Light on the Wednesday before the council meeting. Again, we don't have necessarily our agenda set in stone. I know I don't have all the materials and everything until usually Thursday or Friday before, but Harbor Light's a once a week publication, so we at least get a notice in there that what we think will be on that agenda, and we put that in the Harbor Light. That's something we started, I think, last year. And then we've also now started we started a monthly e-newsletter that we email out at the beginning of the month. It's also on our website. And, we also have some physical copies here at City Hall. So those are just some ways we're trying to communicate more with the public. If council recalls earlier, we did pass a public participation plan. We adopted a public participation plan. There's a lot in that plan. There's a lot more we can be doing to reach out, to communicate to the public, and to make things more accessible. And we're tackling those things step at a time. It's work, but we're doing things one step at a time, and hopefully we'll keep on improving and get to a better spot every year. How's the city preparing and planning for the future? Well, since 2019, we actually created a capital improvements plan, which is required by state law for the first time. So we have a capital improvements plan that we review and adopt every year, which looks 6 years into the future, and it's not a guarantee of projects that we're going to do. It's a look at what projects may come up and when they may come up, and how we're going to pay for them, how much they're going to cost, and what's their prioritization. So capital improvements plan really helps council, the public, and city staff really take a peep into the future on what we need to prepare for. As mentioned, we created a public participation plan. We created a tree plan, and we've updated the master plan, and we're nearing completion of the parks plan and the harbor plan, which will take to council next month. And we've, of course, just adopted a downtown development and TIF plan tonight. So those are just, again, ways that we need to prepare and plan for the future. There's other things that we've done too. For example, we've had an electric system study done in last year. We also had a rate study done. So these that hadn't been done in a long time. So these things all go together for planning. It does take time, but it helps us guide us into the direction that we want to go. And these are guides, they're flexible, but they at least give us an idea of where we want to go on these topics. So why is the city seeking a public safety millage? We kind of went over this in August. And Chief Knight apologized, he can't be here. He had applied for and received a grant, 100% paid for, to attend the Chiefs Conference, the Police Chiefs Conference. So he won't be back till Wednesday, but he'd be more than happy to talk about the police budget and police operations with you. But we couldn't pass on the opportunity of having a all paid for Chiefs Conference, and going to a National Police Chiefs Conference is a great opportunity for our police department to know what's going on. So I'll go through a few slides here, but it'd be great for any residents or council members that have questions to speak with Chief Knight. He's always open to talk. So the cost of public safety has increased significantly, at least in Harbor Springs, compared to other general fund expenses. So since 2002, and we went over this before, but since 2002, police department expenses has increased 115%. Fire department expenses 155%, while other general fund expenses have increased by 44%. And so another reason why we're seeking is because police and fire protection is something that residents have stated they wanted on surveys. So in one survey of about 274 residents, 97% said existing fire and police operations are relevant to keeping Harbor Springs quaint and vibrant. The survey of 115 residents, 90% were more satisfied or just as satisfied with police and fire protection compared to 10 years ago. Also, 94% of residents, that should be 94% of respondents, sorry about that. 94% of respondents of those surveys are very satisfied or satisfied with police protection. 90% of those respondents were very satisfied with fire protection. So clearly, and at least in surveys that we've done and some of the formal and informal conversations we've had, people value the police protection, value the fire services, and it's one thing that residents want to keep and they know is an important part of the community. But as mentioned, costs are going up. So nationwide since 2002, costs have increased by an average of 72%. So we cannot continue providing other general fund operations and services at a reduced cost. So remember, our other general fund services costs have gone up 44%, while inflation since 2002 has gone up 72%. So our costs for general fund services, aside from police and fire, have not kept up essentially with the rising costs of goods and services. Another reason is public safety is the largest portion of the general fund budget. Annually, it's become, in the past 10 years, between 35 and 40%. Now that varies. When you have retirements of police officers, that'll go up. When you have some capital purchases, that'll go up. Years that we don't have those things going on, that percentage gets lower. Same thing with the fire department. Some years they have capital purchases, some years they don't. But generally, it's definitely well over a third of our budget, and it's growing. So the public should be the ones to decide whether or not to guarantee some funding for public safety, so other general fund operation services are not reduced or compromised, if that's what the public wants. I've heard someone say that the public safety millage is just a shell game, and it's not. And the city has determined multiple times, the council, with advice from staff and on its own, has determined that the city needs more revenue to maintain its existing operations, services, and infrastructure. The public safety millage would guarantee some funding for police and fire operations while freeing up money for other existing operations and services and other maintenance of infrastructure. For example, Boardwalk has been cited several times. Voters did reject the Headley override twice. Council listened to the voters' concerns and narrowly tailored a public safety millage, asking for less money overall and for a shorter period of time. The millage itself, I'll get into the details of that, but well, let me do that first here. So the public safety millage versus the Headley override. So this should not say Headley override, I should say public safety millage, sorry about that. But the public safety millage is a maximum total general fund at 5 years. What our maximum general fund could be 6.7 mils. With the Headley override, the maximum could have been 8.0 mils at 5 years. For the public safety millage, the millage expires after 5 years. and can only be renewed if residents vote to renew it. There was no expiration date on the millage in the Headley override. And for the public safety millage, we'll have guaranteed funding for police and fire. We have 1 mil guaranteed for police and fire. Under the Headley override, there was no money earmarked for any specific service or operation. So those are some of the differences there. It was said, that we spend a lot of money on our police, per capita, and that is true if you look at it at our permanent, if you look only at our registered voters, which are give or take from 1,200. It is about $725 a year. But if you factor in our summer population, which if you base on 2/3 of our homes being summer population, you could have it's 3 times as many people. So we're talking about $250 per person. If you count all the employees that work in the city, if you talk about the tourists, if you talk about the township people who visit and recreate here, our police serve much more than just 1,200 people. They serve 1,200 homes. They serve scores of businesses. They have parks, the streets. There's a lot they do. Obviously, a lot more in the summer that they do than they do in the winter months. But they service a lot more than just 1,200 registered voters. And we're different than a town in the middle of North Dakota. Sorry, Tyler, that has no resorters or tourists coming there. We are a resort community. We also have a lot of tourists here, and we service a lot of the townships as a central business hub for them. So we'll go on to. So this question has come up a lot on why we need a second substation and why does it have to be in the city limits. Very briefly, we've mentioned this several times, but the existing substation on the far eastern end of our grid cannot support the entire system load for a majority of the year, and especially during the summer peak months. This was determined in the 2006 study by our electric engineer, and then again in 2021 study that increasing the size of this existing substation will increase the capacity of the transformer, but it won't do anything to solve the voltage issues and the loss of voltage and the loss of electricity as electricity travels from the far eastern side of our grid all the way to the far western side of our grid. And there's been some suggestion that, I heard that, our electricity comes from downstate, and it doesn't lose electricity as it comes all the way up to Harbor Springs, and they're telling us that it loses electricity in the 9 miles it comes from our substation to, well, there's something we need to differentiate there. One is there's transmission lines and there's distribution lines. Transmission lines take the electricity from the plant that the electricity is being produced at and takes it to distribution systems. Those transmission lines are very dangerous, very tall. They are hundreds of thousands of volts running through them. They are not meant for residential areas. They're not meant for municipalities. They're usually more done in rural areas, and you probably see them sometimes along the highways or interstates. They're gigantic, they're metal towers, a lot of wires going to them. Then they get to their distribution point, and there's what's called a step-down substation, which is what we have here at our substation. That step-down substation takes that electricity that we receive all the way from whether it's hundreds of miles away or 50 miles away, takes that electricity, steps it down and delivers it to the homes. We reduce the voltage there from hundreds of thousands of volts to thousands of volts. And why does that matter is because the higher voltage you have in the lines, the less loss of electricity you have. When you have less voltage, you have more loss of electricity. So those large transmission lines you see coming from the power plants, those have a loss of 1% to 2% of electricity. The lines that you see running in our city, they can have a loss of 4, 5, 6 more percent, depending on the lines, depending on the age, depending on the way the substation is centered. So these lines then, they even drop more in voltage when they get to your house. So once you deliver electricity to your house, they drop it down to, let's say, 120 volts. You have a little transformer box or cabinet outside your home, and that delivers electricity safely into your home. So that explains why, you just can't just add lines or increase voltage on some of these lines. You can't have the same kind of voltage. You can't have the same kind of loss that you have on transmission lines as you have on distribution lines. So the city engineer, electric engineer, has examined this in 2006 and 21 and says the only feasible option here, if we want to prevent loss, prevent future brownouts, and save money in the long run is to build the substation in the center of the grid. The center of the grid is basically closest to in the city limits. There's some places outside the city limits that run along our distribution line that comes from through Bester Road down to Hoyt Road. But there's not many public parcels in that area. We'll be coming back to council next month with, again, a list of locations that council can decide, compare and analyze and decide on which locations is the most appropriate. But at this point, that is the reason why we're doing it. Why were people notified about the substation? I heard this one as well, and well, it's because we never got to that point. The point, this is a large project, and it was going to go to the planning commission. When large capital projects go to the planning commission, we notify neighbors. And large capital projects are defined as projects that cost $40,000 or more per our capital improvements project plan. So our historical process has always been to discuss these issues first at city council and then take them to the planning commission. When they go to the planning commission, that's when we typically mail out notices to neighbors, because the neighbors are the ones that are gonna be affected. So when we get to that stage, wherever we decide where the substation is gonna be located, that is when it goes to the planning commission is when we'll notify neighbors about the meeting. Just saying off of that, the discussion of the substation was posted, was in our several agendas since last year, over the course of the year, posted in public places as we do all our agendas. And the same thing with the Zorn Park Beach playground. So just want to recap something about the Zorn Park Beach here. As many people know here, the playground has existed at Zorn Park Beach for several decades. It was temporarily removed in 2020 due to high water and some safety and liability concerns. So at that time, we notified council and the public, which included a public posting on the beach, at the actual beach house, that the playground would be moved to the grassy area adjacent to the beach. In 2021, the city began seriously exploring those options for relocating the same exact equipment that met ADA accessibility standards, because you cannot replace that equipment back in the sand because the sand does not meet accessibility standards. We updated council and the Parks Board several times about this in open meetings. Since then, the residents have expressed opinions. Some have expressed it should be in a different location. Some think it should be in a different park, and some think it shouldn't be there at all. What we did is we've passed it on to several different boards. It's gone to council, it's gone to Parks Board, it's gone to Planning Commission, and it'll be going to be talked about the Parks Board again tomorrow night, as well as the Planning Commission on Thursday night. And to distinguish between a substation is this was never planned to be a capital project. We didn't have the funds to spend on purchasing new playground equipment or spending a lot of money on surface. So we worked with what we had, which was a donation from a donor to reinstall the playground equipment in wood chips on the grassy area of Zorn Park. As I mentioned earlier, we send capital projects, usually purchases of $10,000 or projects of $40,000. Those are considered capital improvement plans. Those are taken to council or to Planning Commission. Historically, the city has never taken, I won't say never, but has not taken any of these small projects to the Planning Commission. This is the first recollection that we've taken something like a playground to the Planning Commission. So it's not typical, but we're doing it, and hopefully a decision will be made soon, one way or the other. Why isn't the city trying to get more grants and donations? Well, we're always working for grants and donations. And, as Chief worked hard to get his grant to attend the police chiefs conference. But in the past 2 years, we've accepted and received and accepted over $600,000 in grants and donations and rebates for a variety of things. That includes tree plantings, parks and recreations, events, programs, the boardwalk, skate park, COVID relief, and other projects. So we are working to get donations, and we are working to find grants. It's not always easy, but we're doing what we can with what we have. We also expect to receive some large six-figure donations in the next month here or so for some of our projects. And we'll probably have an announcement about that once it's confirmed at the next council meeting. I've heard this one a few times. If I donate the money, if I donate to the city, where does the money actually go? So some people have said they've been told that if you donate money to the city will spend it on things other than what they want it to be spent on. Well, that's not true. If you donate money for a specific project or operation, that money is earmarked for that project or operation. For example, if you donate $500 or now it's $600 for a tree, that money goes to a tree, to plant a tree. If you donate money for the boardwalk, it goes to the boardwalk. The skate park, it goes to the skate park, and et cetera. If you just donate money just to donate to the city, yeah, then we'll direct it where we think it needs to go. But most people don't just donate money to the city without earmarking a specific project. So, and yes, it's most people find they can write off their donations to the city on their taxes, but they should speak to their accountant about that. This one's been circulating around a few times, and are there people serving on boards who are not allowed to be serving on boards? And right now, the answer to that is no. We follow state law on who's allowed to be on city boards and commissions. Those laws for the Planning Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals require that an individual must be a city elector to serve on those boards, which is not the same thing as a registered voter of the city. Further, in March of 2022, the city clarified via an ordinance that the city will prioritize registered voters for board appointments so long as it does not conflict with state law. And again, state law says you can have electors on the Planning Commission and the Zoning Board of Appeals. So no appointments made since this new ordinance was enacted, which was in March. No new appointments have been made that have been non-registered voters. And the city has not knowingly appointed a greater amount of non-city electors than allowed per state law to its boards in the past 3 years. So the difference between elector and a registered voter, because this is confusing, we kind of hashed this out in March when we were discussing this ordinance on creating a definition of who can serve on city boards. So a registered voter of the city is pretty self-explanatory. If you're registered to vote in the city, you're on the city's voter roll, so you're a registered voter. However, determining who an elector is much more difficult, as an elector does not have to be a registered voter. The state constitution defines elector as the following: every citizen of the United States who has attained the age of 21 years, who has resided in the state for 6 months, and who meets the requirements of local residence provided by state law shall be elector. So there's nothing there about being a registered voter. So what does local residence mean? So state law says that a residence for registration and voting purposes means that a place at which a person habitually sleeps, keeps his personal effects, and has a regular place of lodging. This isn't easy for staff. So this is why we enacted that ordinance, because it's not easy for staff to determine if someone has, let's say they have 2 homes and they stay at one for 6 months and another at 6 months. Well, it's very difficult for us to determine at which one they habitually keep their personal effects and where they habitually sleep. So we adopted the ordinance. So since we don't have an easy means to determine that, we adopted an ordinance that states the following: except as otherwise provided, membership on city boards or commissions shall be limited to city residents, being registered voters, and to other persons domiciled within the city who are qualified to be electors in state law as determined by city clerk. So if someone says they're not a registered voter and that they have a right to be on a board for state law because they're an elector, then we will do the work. And now we have a process set in place to figure that out, but before we didn't have a process. So the assertions that our boards that are improperly constituted are not really based on the facts or the law. The law, again, is not really clear, and it's really not easy to determine who is an elector, but there is a difference between an elector and a registered voter. What are we doing for housing? And yes, the city has contributed $25,000 over the course of 3 years to help address the city's and regions' housing affordability and shortage situation. We've teamed up with area municipalities to contribute to individuals' salary, to a program director to look into this. And they've been working and try to collaborate with different cities and different personnel and different organizations to make this happen. And I think this has been year 2. The first year was last year was $5,000 we contributed. This year is $10,000. Next year is another $10,000 for a total of $25,000. The city created a full-time park director position. Yes, we did. And to do so, we eliminated the full-time assistant to the city manager position and a part-time parks director position. So that saved the city $30,000. So we reorganized, we restructured, we created a new position, but we eliminated 1.5 positions, 1.5 positions. So yes, we created a new position, but we don't have more staff working here than we had previously based on that new position. This one comes up a lot, and we talked about this at council several times, and Nick and I have talked about administrative fees and what's appropriate. And some have suggested that we can just increase administrative fees to the general fund in order to cover our expenses, so taxes don't have to increase. And no, I don't think that's right. I don't think we can just do that. So what are administrative fees? If you remember, administrative fees are those fees that the general fund charges other funds like the electric fund or the water fund or the waterfront fund for city staff to do work for those funds, as well as, you know, any equipment or stationary items or whatnot that we use in advancing, you know, the goals and the projects in those other funds. So we charge, you know, for example, I'm just pulling out some numbers here, but we charge $200-something thousand to the electric fund and administrative fees to cover the amount of hours I work per week on electric. Some weeks I'm working 10, 15 hours on electric fund stuff. Some weeks I'm working 5 hours. We're working at a system, and we're going to try to work at a system to better monitor exactly how we are determining those fees. But you can't just increase administrative fees to the general fund. First reason, it's unethical. It's really unethical to charge electric, water, and waterfront customers higher fees so we can cover general fund operations. You don't want to increase someone's electric bill and as part of our electric system, so they have to pay less in taxes. You're basically getting at them one way versus the other. You're going to increase their fees through the bills you send them, or you're going to increase their taxes. That's, you know, it's really not right. So it's really not right to do it that way. The other ones, it's really irresponsible. So if we've been taking out, you know, more money than we need from the electric fund or waterfront to cover general fund operations, we're taking away money from those funds that we eventually need to maintain infrastructure and improve infrastructure in those funds. And we're finding out that the hard way with our electric fund, where we have an anticipated between $10 and $12 million in projects in the next 6 years, or had we not been transferring the amount of money we've been transferring into the general fund over several decades, maybe we would have had more money saved up in our electric fund, or have done more of those projects throughout the decades. And this is not necessarily saying that what happened before was wrong. It was just the result of many different factors coming together for why administrative fees were applied that way. You know, other cities don't know what to do with administrative fees. We've talked to a lot of different places. Nowhere really has a good formula for them. A lot of places are basically doing guesswork at how much they should charge other funds. And then there's a lot of guesswork unless city staff really tracks, you know, by the half hour, you know, exactly how much time they're spending on each different funds. It's really hard to figure out how much money should be going to those funds. So that's one that I think we can talk more about at budget time, but it's just one to remember that it's not an easy way to solve our financial problems just by transferring money from one fund to the other. And this one, what I heard, which it's not true. You will not get arrested for using the boardwalk. No one has been arrested or ticketed or threatened of arrest or threatened to be ticketed for using the boardwalk. The boardwalk is closed because it's unsafe, and we want to minimize any liability to the city, and we want to minimize any safety concerns. So we determined it was unsafe. Actually, it was determined it was or was going to be unsafe several years ago, starting in 2016 and 17. To 2021, we made a determination that it's too unsafe to use. We close it. We put orange barricade around it to prevent people, or at least to discourage people from going on it. Please don't go on it. You shouldn't be going on it, but police aren't ticketing people or threatening to arrest people for going on it. And that is the end of my presentation. However, there's a lot more we can cover. There's a lot other topics, but I plan on after elections, like I did last year, when there's a council, we did a little overview of government operations from basically A to Z on, you know, what council does, what staff does. And then we'll get into budget and capital improvements planning in December. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of moving parts in government. And so I know it's hard for people, you know, even if you come to every meeting, there's a lot going on, you know. That's why we have full-time staff, you know, to do this and to advise council. But there's a lot going on. There's a lot to digest. And we try to do our best to condense it and deliver it succinctly to council, but there's a lot there. So as I mentioned earlier, if you have questions for Chief Knight about the budget, police budget and police operations, please speak out to him. Anything about the budget or elections related, you can speak to Clerk Whitaker. I'm more than happy to sit down with people and talk to them. And I'm as well happy to talk with anyone. I spend a lot of time emailing people and having conversations with people on the phone or in person about these topics, and I'm more than happy to do so. So that's all I have, council. If you have any questions for me, or if you want to open it up to questions.
No question. I think you covered everything pretty well. Well done. Any public comment? Lacy.
Maggie Lacy, 315 East Third Street. So I wanted to just touch upon the housing. We pay $2,500, and that is to Housing North. Excuse me, this is to Housing North. And this is some information that I just want to make sure that we are being transparent, because part of Housing North is that we do participate in the RRC, and they do have a toolkit and a checklist that they implement. And one of the big things is about zoning. And I want to implement the parking as well. If you don't mind taking this and passing that down. So it seems to me that it's like a plug and play. I went to Dick's Sporting Goods, and you know, Dick's Sporting Goods, there's all over the country. And basically, if you're doing a Merrill promotion, you understand that you're gonna be doing just like here, and you're gonna be doing it this time and this date, and these are what the prices are. And it seems like we are walking in for Harbor Springs into a plug and play with the Housing North and as well as the RRC. This is not being unique to our town. And so I just want to make sure that we are bringing this forward as part of the communication that says with the RRC is that you're supposed to be bringing the boards together and having an annual meeting about how this works with the community. So we understand exactly that we are going to be looking to have minimal parking, high density, eliminating exclusive single family zoning, missing middle housing for high density triplexes and so forth. This is some major changes that are taking place in the town, and we are paying them to give us a plug and play, which is going to be competing already with the rest of the towns for grant money. So it's the same thing that we're doing in Charlevoix or Leelanau, and you are looking at a very small group of individuals that are focusing on moving this forward. So I just kind of want to make sure that the public is aware of what these changes are taking place, and to investigate a little bit more about the background of Housing North and a little bit more about RRC. I understand the RRC, the baseline was uploaded on the website, so I appreciate that. And everybody can go there and look at that information, okay? But I do believe that the zoning department and all of the different boards do need to be in one room and talking about what that vision is to the future of this town. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, this is Maureen Kenny. I can't see my place to raise my hand. Am I able to speak?
Yeah.
So throughout Victor's report, which was very thorough, he repeatedly said, I've heard this one as well. Well, I think he heard all of it last week at the candidates forum. And a lot of these slides, almost the majority of them, were in response to the opposing candidates' views and things that were brought up there. So I kind of feel this is unfair that he had this platform and the ability to go against what a lot of people were talking about at the candidates forum. So I would just like to raise that as a red flag as everybody works towards transparency, that I feel like the city just had a big, huge political platform that they were able to use against some of the opposing candidates. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Brenda Miller, 651 Second Street. On the tail end of Maureen Kenny, I appreciate what she said. I've just noticed, like, if you attended the candidate forum last Monday, then you also must be experiencing deja vu with the rest of us, because tonight's agenda packet being 84 pages long and 43 of these pages being city manager's presentation is clearly a one-man candidate forum. After hearing this meeting here, he took his city council meeting hat off and put on his lobbyist and campaigning and persuasion hat. By design, this presentation would take 43 people at 3 minutes to refute all these claims. There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of omission of information. The content and information has presented is nothing more than damage mitigation and spin control to skew and represent the three candidates who came in well prepared and have attended in person or on Zoom and participated at every city council meeting for over a year. They've committed hours of personal time staying current and informed on city affairs. The candidates presented accurate facts, figures, and showed the ability to communicate honestly, intelligently, and professionally. Parenthetically, when the 20-year Headley failed city manager put on a presentation exactly in the same manner as tonight, bulleting a stream of incomplete and out of context information in a lengthy presentation like this. Not to mention holding his own press conference on 9 and 10 News claiming that Harbor Springs was in an emergency financial situation, implying that we were broke. Tonight's city manager has once again swerved out of his lane using taxpayers' money and time during business hours to create a 43-page campaign and candidate advancement for his obvious and current city council incumbents. City manager must see the need to resuscitate the campaign message of his pet council candidates. He is designing and manipulating the outcome of an election, as I see it tonight, and to maintain his preferred cabinet or council. City manager per city charter 4.7 states city manager is to serve city council. This city council seems to show signs of Stockholm syndrome as they seem to adore the puppet master and his mechanically rubber stamps every agenda he floats past them, thus rendering the taxpayers unrepresented and unprotected. Manager wants this city council and only this one because he can control them. It must be grossly illegal that this city manager tonight is misusing taxpayers' dollars and misuse of a city council meeting to manipulate the outcome of an election in his favor. Monday night's forum has passed, and all candidates completely and fairly got one whack at the apple. And tonight, city manager has decided he wants a do-over. After reading all 43 pages of incomplete information and omission of facts after tonight's presentation, I have one thing to say. Thou don't protest too much.
Thank you.
Shannon Duncan, I have a question. I was wondering what the city's procedure is if the 5G tower were to catch on fire on the school. Have you got a procedure for it together yet?
Well, the fire department,
Well, if it's
bring in the big
electrical
ladder
fire,
truck.
They actually can't spray the fire. They have to spray the surrounding area. So the only thing that actually can happen is for it to explode and burn out on its own. So better get that together.
Typical electrical fire.
I would just like to thank Victor for putting this together. I watched the candidates forum last week, and I think this presentation tonight just simply, in the matter of being transparent, negated some of the facts or unfacts that were thrown out last week. And this was very informative, and I thought that I was pretty much up to date, but this was extremely informative, so thank you very much.
Hey, Adam Sherry, once again, I'm just curious, you said the city's received 600,000 in grants in the last 2 years, and then you listed a number of things that the grants were received for, but there wasn't a breakout. Can you tell us how much was received for COVID relief out of the 600,000?
We can get a breakdown for you. We can contact Nick, we can get that breakdown for you.
Yeah.
Don't have that exact figures with me right here, but we can get that to you. We can contact City Hall.
Anyone else? Good. Any more old business?
Enough.
The 119 damage, I was walking around up there in the rain this weekend. And it seemed, I know that Victor told us the end of this month, the state indicated it would be fixing that. Man, it's eroding incredibly fast. It's undercutting the asphalt now. Can we put pressure on them? Can we?
We did talk to them. I think it's they're trying to get a temporary fix at the end of this month, but it might not be till next year till they have it actually open. And so we've been talking with them about that. And we've been going back and forth about whose responsibility certain parts are. They're suggesting some of it's our responsibility, even though it's their right of way. So, yeah, we're still talking about it. So as far as putting pressure, we have 5, I think, outstanding issues with MDOT right now, where they've been trying to basically make us pay for things or make us do things that we don't believe we should be doing. But this is just one of those instances where we're still talking about it.
It just seems that, you know, with semis going over that, once they open it.
Yeah.
That there's just not enough there to hold it together. There's no substructure left anymore. It's all slid down the hill.
It would appear the longer they wait, the bigger the project, but
No kidding.
we have no lever to pull.
Originally, back in 2017, 18, I believe the city was going to put in some sort of curbing system to curb the flow of water that was coming down Harrison Street and gutter it down, basically curb it down M119. But that project at that time came out significantly higher than we had anticipated. I mean, it was before I was here, but I talked to Lucas about that, and that we didn't go forward with that. But ultimately, in the end, we believe it's, you know, it's MDOT's right away. It's their road. You know, it's that Harrison Street's been running water down to M119 that way for, you know, 100 years or so. It's they know about it, and they just haven't done anything to address it, even when the first washout happened. So now they have to do a more serious fix, and we don't know what that's going to look like. We're actually still working with them to get the proper detour, the right kind of detour signage.
Yeah, they can't even get the signage right.
And we're working back and forth with them about that. But I do see a lot of people going up State Street and turning left on Summit as opposed to going all the way to Lake Street.
That's all I do.
You know your way around.
That's what the GPS tells you.
Should go in the city manager report. So the sidewalk has been poured for the sidewalk project on State Street between Snyder and Lake. They're still finishing up, so hopefully that'll be soon. We have spoken with Bay Bluffs regarding the planned removal of those pine trees on M119 underneath our power lines. Bay Bluff is completely supportive of our efforts there because those pine trees fall on, that's the electricity to their building. So we're now awaiting a second bid for the tree removal before we come to council to discuss and select a bid. And we talked already once at tree board, we're going to discuss again at tree board. Species replacement. One of the things there is it looks great with those tall pine trees, but we can't have tall trees there underneath those lines. So we're gonna put trees back there, but there can be smaller trees so they don't interfere with those lines because those are some critical infrastructure there. The Main Street Christmas tree will be delivered on Wednesday, November 9th. So that's happening.
Hey, Victor, who's it coming from this year?
It's coming Ellsworth, so I'll get a name for you.
Oh, come on.
Yeah. Elections Tuesday, November 8th, and the next council meeting, as a reminder for everyone here, is on Monday, November 7th at 12 p.m. noon. We're having it at noon because city clerk has to set up for elections the next day. We don't want to be here till midnight and then have to come here at 6 a.m. That's basically what I have. Oh, well, boards and commissions, we did have our first noise control committee meeting where we just did some basic introductions and talked about some of the noise issues in the city. It was clarified there that church bells of themselves weren't an issue. It was the ringing, the music, the playing of the music is what was under discussion. I just want to clarify that it's not the bells per se that the people are talking about. Parks Board reviewed Fall Fest and Zorn Park playground options. Harbor Commission set rates for 2023, approved the harbor plan, discussed renewal of dock and dredge, and entertain idea of improvement of a waterfront park. The DDA discusses downtown development plan and amended TIP plan, among some other things. So I have.
Great. I think we're all done. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you all for coming.